So today we're going to be back in Johnson City, Tennessee, and we're going to look a bit more at the growing allegations against the city and the police department for a possible cover-up of this Johnson City businessman and alleged serial R-word, Sean Williams. If you haven't watched part 1 and part 2, I highly recommend checking them out. I'll link them in the description, but it'll get you up to speed with how we got here. So again, we're zooming into June 21st, 2023, and this is by Jeff Keeling. And we're entering a phase where attorneys are helping alleged victims of Sean Williams seek redress in civil court. This effort is being led by a former federal prosecutor, Vanessa Baehr-Jones, and she's spoken with some of the alleged victims. Baehr-Jones learned of this Williams case a year ago from attorneys for Cathy Ball. If you've watched part 1 and part 2, that was the former prosecutor who was working for the Johnson City Police Department, and Kat is currently suing the Johnson City Police Department for retaliation, because she alleges that when she tried to bring forward concerns about this man, they kind of pushed back on her, dropped the ball, and then ended up letting her go for poor performance. And we get this great summation by Baehr-Jones. She says, "We're talking about years of a dangerous predator who is a known drug dealer, by the way, drugging and R-wording women. That's as serious kind of conduct as you get. And that conduct causing incredible harm, so anybody who's inculpated in that conspiracy in any way, under any theory of liability, that's very serious." So at this point in time, there ended up being 9 Jane Does, who alleged to have been R-worded or essayed by Williams. And I think this part of this article is really interesting too, because it's going to talk about why they're taking the civil route. So monetary damages are one obvious angle of pursuit in civil court, but Baehr-Jones said other truth-speaking tools of the civil justice system can extend beyond compensation for survivors. I think about this all the time of how can we use the tools of the civil justice system and as advocates for survivors persuade and help the criminal justice system in accomplishing justice in the way that they are able to advance the bigger idea of what justice looks like for this client. Now, this makes a lot of sense when we take into context that there may be a police cover-up involved here. Could these Jane Does rely on the criminal justice system? Part of the allegations are that police are taking bribes from this businessman who is allegedly a serial R-word. Would the criminal justice system be the proper avenue? Would it be a successful strategy to pursue justice in that context? Probably not. And then Baehr-Jones said she and Carolyn Drennan, a Nashville area attorney, are working with the alleged survivors, regardless of anybody's ability to pay. Drennan also notes that a potential advantage of the civil court is the reliance on the preponderance of evidence standard, meaning they don't need to prove to the greater standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. And another reason for the civil action here is 2 primary clauses within the Constitution: due process and equal protection. So Baehr-Jones says that one tool civil litigators have used is to say if a police department or a government entity has policies or practices that fail to protect women or fail to protect SA survivors, and those policies or practices are animated by discrimination, they're based on a discriminatory animus towards women. That's a claim that women can bring under the Equal Protection Clause, she said. At the due process level, she said a violation occurs if a government entity violates your substantive due process rights by doing something that shocks the conscience, or does something called a state-created danger, where the state actor is actually part of creating this danger. And then again, we are in 2023, we're going to catch up to speed, but at this point in time, Baehr-Jones is also noting that criminal SA or R-word charges against Williams are not an impossibility. Tennessee's statute of limitations for aggravated R-word is 15 years, and it is 8 years for both R-word and aggravated SA. So it is absolutely not too late for there to be real criminal accountability here. So again, this is where we're starting to see some of the talk, the stories, the experiences kind of become stitched together through lawsuits. So a federal civil lawsuit filed Wednesday claims Johnson City Police knew a downtown business owner drugged and R-worded multiple women and that they, quote, let him get away with it. The lawsuit with 9 Jane Doe plaintiffs seeks damages against Johnson City, former Johnson City Police Department Chief Carl Turner, 2 other named officers, and 6 yet unnamed officers. It lays out timelines and details in each of the 9 alleged victims' cases, including the case of one woman who died after crashing her car, while allegedly still incapacitated by drugs and distraught over something that had occurred at Williams' downtown apartment. And this is new to us, but we have heard about Michaela Evans, who mysteriously fell from Sean Williams' 5-story window, and she had to be sedated for 3 weeks to recover in the hospital. And even though a SANE test was done, that's the SA test that they perform, For whatever reason, she wasn't tested for drugs in her system. They didn't test her for that. So now we're seeing here where Jane Doe, who ends up dying after she crashes her car, was allegedly still incapacitated by drugs and distraught over something that occurred at Williams' downtown apartment. So this federal lawsuit opens with this line. For years, Sean Williams drugged and R-worded women in Johnson City, Tennessee, and for years, officers of the Johnson City Police Department let him get away with it. The suit claims a Johnson City Police Department pattern of failure to investigate Williams' alleged crimes against women starting at least as early as 2018 up to mid-2021, which is what we've covered so far in Part 1 and Part 2. On May 5th, 2021, Williams went out on the lam following an attempt by JCPD officers to arrest him on a federal warrant for being a felon in possession of ammunition. The lawsuit claims violations of the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution, as well as violations of the alleged victim's rights to due process. It also claims the city violated Title IX, and that the JCPD's handling of numerous allegations was done with deliberate indifference to the constitutional rights of plaintiffs, with a purpose to harm that was unrelated to any legitimate law enforcement initiative. These actions, known and authorized by Johnson City, Tennessee, were knowing, reckless, negligent, and deprive plaintiffs of their constitutional rights to equal protection and due process, as well as their rights under Title IX of the Education Amendments. The 6-count suit also includes a claim that JCPD violated Tennessee's Governmental Tort Liability Act through negligence in its response to the women's allegations, and claims that the JCPD was negligent in failing to both train and supervise its officers, and that even when made aware of complaints, JCPD officers and employees failed to investigate those complaints and failed to protect these female citizens of Johnson City from further criminal activity by Williams. Based on interviews with the plaintiffs, attorneys alleged that Williams, with the aid of a male friend and at least one woman, recruited women and brought them to a downtown garage he owned and his downtown apartment, quote, where he would drug and essay them. While accounts differ in some ways, some women reported to the police, others didn't, some had tests done, there are common themes. They include a pattern of Williams' conspirators bringing women up to parties at his apartment, women being handed drinks from separate bottles or given cocaine on different trays than those used by Williams and male guests, and women losing consciousness and or control of their bodies to some degree. There are also several allegations of Williams holding women at his apartment against their will or telling them they were too incapacitated to leave, either before or after he had allegedly assaulted them. The accounts include numerous references to JCPD officers not following through on requests for investigations after reports of assaults by Williams. Jane Doe 2 allegedly was administered a R-word kit at an urgent care in November 2019 and provided a statement to 2 JCPD officers at that time. Jane Doe 2 did not hear anything more from JCPD for a year and a half, the suit alleges. Detective Thomas Sparks then allegedly called Jane Doe 2 in May of 2021 and told her that she had benzodiazepine in her system the night of the alleged assault. The kit also showed another person's DNA present in the sample collected. After relaying this information, Detective Sparks discouraged Jane Doe 2 from pursuing charges against Williams, the suit says. He told Jane Doe 2 that even if he was able to get a warrant to collect and test Williams' DNA, Williams would have to willingly submit to the testing, and he would never do that. In fact, this statement was false, as a warrant would require Williams to submit to testing. Detective Sparks described Williams as, quote, untouchable. The suit says Jane Doe 2 still told Sparks she wanted to proceed with pressing charges and that she never received a response. That makes me so mad. Oh my gosh. I want to comment on like the legal side of it. Like, this is not good for the lawsuit if this can be corroborated, right? And this was probably verbal over the phone, but still you have statements, and it seems like we'll probably have testimony from Jane Doe 2 under oath. And her testimony would become evidence. But this alone, what do you guys think if you were a juror and you accepted at face value? Just this one story for Jane Doe 2 alone. Do you think Johnson City Police Department has liability here? This bothered me. This is really bothersome. And I know this isn't the only place that this happens. And now we're going to get to the PR battle. So the next day, we have this press statement from the city of Johnson City.
Thank you all for being here today. We've had these before, and I appreciate your all's continued support in us doing kind of interactions with you through these media briefings. It helps us because we're able to be able to have a conversation, have one statement that's made, and then each of y'all be able to pick up on it and ask questions during it. I will say that my name is Cathy Ball. I'm the city manager for the city of Johnson City. I will be giving a statement, and then if you all want to ask questions, you can. We will be very limited in the questions that we can answer, given that we have a lawsuit on hand and we have a pending lawsuit. So we have not yet been filed, but we have those two things. We're trying to be transparent, trying to provide information. So we want to be able to use this outlet. And again, we appreciate your help in doing this. So as I said before, the city of Johnson City was made aware of a civil suit filed in Greenville yesterday. We've not yet been formally filed with this lawsuit or served with this lawsuit. This claim was made in the lawsuit will be addressed. The facts will be presented, and it will be in civil court. We were first made aware of some of these allegations a year ago. We heard from citizens who expressed concerns about how our police department investigated sexual assaults. We took those concerns seriously and immediately hired a national expert, an independent third-party law firm to review our processes and procedures. We are expecting the results from the Daigle Law Group within the next 2 weeks. We shared with you information previously about some of the things that we recommended in the budget as part of the recommendations that Daigle is making based upon our conversations with him. We additionally, we want to take the opportunity to thank General Finney. Upon his taking office in the fall of 2022, he provided not only our department, but every department in the 1st Judicial District protocol to be able to follow in sexual assault cases. Our department has been following those cases, has been trained on it, and are moving forward in that direction. We are proud to be a partner with the DA's office in that. I want to say today that I have every confidence in the Johnson City Police Department. The men and women in the department have integrity and they do great work. I assure you, these officers are diligent in ensuring the rights of victims are respected, and those efforts are supported by our command staff. Furthermore, we understand that individuals who do not choose to become we understand that individuals do not choose to become victims. And we know that it's difficult to discuss traumatic events. However, we encourage victims to report these crimes so that offenders may be brought to justice.
I was going to let this play in full because it's a press statement, and I wanted you to take it in how you want to take it in. But wow, having that said, right after we just read that line, even if we get a warrant, we can't get him to we can't test his DNA. Detective Sparks describing Williams as untouchable. Jane Doe being discouraged from pursuing charges. And then even when she says she wants to press charges anyway, she never received a response. And then we have here.
We encourage victims to report these crimes so that offenders may be brought to justice. I'm happy, if I can, to address any questions.
Cathy, can you talk about the status of 2 of the officers that were named, Kevin Peters and Thomas Sparks? Are they still with the department? Will they be investigated?
Captain Peters retired February of 2028. Investigator Thomas Sparks is with the department.
Sparks is still with the department.
2023, I'm sorry.
Just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
And do you want to talk about what steps the city is going to take, maybe besides the Daigle report, to build back trust within the community?
I think that we have done that. I think with the initiation of hiring the Daigle Law Group, our efforts were put into having an independent third party come in and look into that. So I think we are in the process, or have started the process of providing information. I will tell you, once we get that Daigle report, it will become public record. So you'll be able to review it. In conversations, we've identified to you that there are things in terms of record keeping, in terms of being able to have a special room that victims feel more comfortable in, providing victim advocates, working with our Child Advocacy Center. So in the last review we did with you, we provided you with information on how we were doing that. We will continually try to improve processes that we do. I will tell you, I'm very confident in the police department. I'm confident in our staff. I think we will continue, though, to look at ways to make sure that our community feels safe.
Are the cases at the center of this lawsuit or the cat dog lawsuit or any other case involving Sean Williams being re-examined or re-pursued now that these allegations are coming to light?
I am not able to speak to that. That would be a criminal lawsuit that I'm not able to address.
You mentioned additional pending litigation, if I heard you correctly.
No, I said that we have not officially been served. We are aware that there is a case that's been filed.
You expressed confidence in the police department. I wanted to know whether you could make any statement about the now two former federal prosecutors who have filed separate lawsuits, and whether there's an implication there that those suits are without merit. Also, whether the city plans to file a motion to dismiss this suit that you haven't yet received, which you may not be able to answer since you haven't been able to see it.
Yeah, I'm not able to answer that question.
There's some pretty strong allegations in these lawsuits. What is your message to the victims? You say that you've made changes in the department, as you have confidence in them, that the community can believe that you have made changes and there's confidence they can trust the Johnson City Police Department.
So I think at this point, the allegations will be reviewed as part of the process. I would tell you that I think the independent study that we had done, the review that we had done, gave us some ideas of how to improve, but I'm not going to speak to anything that was said as part of the lawsuit because they're allegations. And we believe that as the court system moves through, those will be proven in the court of law. And so I'm not going to address any allegations that were made as part of that lawsuit in any way. What we have said is that when we had citizens come forward, express concerns, we took those concerns seriously. And we've done that work, and within 2 weeks, we'll have that information. The allegations will come forward and will be proven. We know that the court system takes a while. We will continue to maintain integrity throughout our department. And we want victims to feel confident coming to the Johnson City Police Department. We have a police department that cares about victims. We have a support system. We're continuing to work with our Family Justice Center, building a closer relationship with our Child Advocacy Center, because we want these victims to get the services they need when they come forward. And that is our statement. That is what we fully believe, and I fully support that. And I know that we have a command staff that does as well.
The statute of limitations for rape is 8 years, I believe, maybe 15 for aggravated rape. Without specifically talking about the allegations in either of these lawsuits, would there be any open-mindedness on the part of the police department to revisit any potential older allegations, potential sexual assault cases, given the fact that you've talked about some of the changes that you all have implemented, even with the VA and that sort of thing? Not necessarily these cases, but any let's say anybody who says, "Hey, I'm a rape victim. I didn't talk before, or I did, but I wasn't satisfied."
We work under the law, so we do not have the ability. I will tell you, we have incredible police department. I will say that again. Our police department does not have this discretion, nor would any good police department, to decide to whether or not they're going to revisit, open. That's all decided by the district attorney's office, by the criminal justice system. So those are not things that are flexible necessarily within our system. What I will tell you is we want today to encourage victims to come forward and to report crimes.
It's a bit humorous that the screen blacked out behind her.
Anything else? Thank you all.
Thank you.
And then the day after this press conference, Jeff Keeling laid out the timelines for various hearings. So again, this is coming back from 2023. The timeline has shifted since then. But in Kateri Dahl's case, we had video depositions this week, right before the Wednesday filing. And then in the fall, they needed to have their expert witnesses disclosed. They needed to have discovery submitted. And then by January 16th, 2024, any dispositive motions needed to be filed. So that would be something like a motion to dismiss. And then on May 14th, trial was supposed to begin. We're going to catch up to speed on that in part 4. At the same time, the state of North Carolina versus Sean Williams, there was supposed to be a preliminary hearing on August 8th, 2023. And then in the federal case for felon in possession of ammunition, we see that the original sealed indictment from April 13th, 2021 was filed by Cathy Ball. Cat Ball was replaced on July 29th of 2021. On May 5th, Sean Williams was arrested by federal agents after being remanded from North Carolina custody. He was then arraigned and denied bond on May 9th. His original counsel, David Leonard, ends up informing News Channel 11 on June 21st that Bryce McKenzie is now acting as Williams' counsel. And then August 22nd was the deadline for a plea bargain, which we're going to find out, but that wasn't taken. And then for the Jane Doe, so far all we had was it was filed and Johnson City did the press statement, the media brief. Now, we just heard Cathy Ball express confidence that the Daigle law firm, their report, it was going to tell them what they needed to hear. And on July 18th, so just shy of a month later from her saying that, Jeff Keeling and Catherine Simpson are giving us an update on what this report found. So they found that the Johnson City Police Department's policies and procedures for essay investigations met neither legal requirements nor industry standards. Uh-oh. That was among 8 findings from a comprehensive look at JCPD's operations, particularly related to SA that took place over the past year. The Daigle Law Group, a nationally recognized expert in law enforcement issues, conducted the audit at the request of city leaders. That followed public outcry over a federal lawsuit that included claims JCPD failed to properly pursue multiple allegations against downtown business owner Sean Williams. The Daigle Law Group reviewed more than 325 SA investigations in cases that occurred between January 28th and December 2022. It reviewed files, interviewed personnel, and sought community input. Other findings include that JCPD's investigations are found to be inconsistent, ineffective, and incomplete. The report also found that supervision of investigations was insufficient to ensure a full, fair, and complete investigation, that training wasn't sufficient to effectively conduct SA investigations, and that the department's process for closing investigations is flawed and inaccurate. And in a response to this report, City Manager Cathy Ball issues a cover letter. Quote, "We acknowledge that victims of sexual assault have not always received the best possible treatment and care from our police department. The department's new leadership team is dedicated to continued changes towards compassionate and effective service so that all citizens know they are safe and protected." And this is important to remember, too, that Carl Turner, who was the police chief in 2022, who protesters demanded to be ousted, retired on February 8th, 2023, as part of an early retirement incentive the city offered. So did a chief investigator, Kevin Peters. Longtime JCPD officer Billy Church was named permanent chief on May 23rd, and the JCPD's entire upper management team has changed this year. The DLG report noted numerous examples of JCPD's processes discouraging victim participation, and said its review showed JCPD's interactions with women reporting SA all too often reflect reliance on gender-based stereotypes and bias. It said that discrimination is responsible in part for the deficiencies in JCPD's response to SA. This is not good for the lawsuit. Well, this is not good for Johnson City in the lawsuit. The report also found some JCPD practices create unnecessary barriers to building trust and rapport with women reporting SA and making reporting unnecessarily burdensome for the victim. And then at this point in time, the city has committed $100,000 towards training and $50,000 towards a new records management system and the creation of a more welcoming space in which SA victims can be interviewed. The Daigle Law Group had said that the archaic system hampered its review and that it spent 6 months working to attempt to locate and review supplementary material, such as warrant affidavits, evidence records, interview recordings, transcripts, and forensic reports. Other findings include that SA investigations have material deficiencies that can hinder the ability to collect necessary evidence for a complete and accurate investigation. And JCPD needs to ensure that all complaints of misconduct against the department, including anonymous complaints, are timely investigated. The report also noted that it received full cooperation from JCPD and the city during the audit, and found that its team found several generally good investigations. It also said that JCPD does not have the widespread problem of underreporting, misclassifying, or downgrading reports of SA that we have observed in other law enforcement agencies. And so here we have a media briefing with Cathy Ball after this report was released. It's quite long, so we're going to get to snippets of it.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. Again, I want to say to you all that I appreciate you setting up in this way to allow us to provide a briefing to our community and to be able to provide information and answer your all's questions. As you all know, we're here today to talk about the findings from the Daigle audit. And I'd like to talk a little bit about what led us to this point in terms of being able to have this audit. Last summer of 2022, we heard from concerned citizens about the way the police department handles sexual assault investigations. As a result of that, we pursued finding a nationally accredited law firm, Daigle Law Group, that could come in and do an assessment and evaluate the way that we performed sexual assault cases. This included reviewing files. It included talking to and doing interviews. It looked at processes and procedures. It looked at national procedures as a part of it. The goal was to have them evaluate and make recommendations to improve the department's policies and procedures. And that is what we have today, and that's what we ask for. Again, talking about the process, during the process, there was approximately 325 cases that were reviewed. The dates of the cases ranged from December of 2018 to December of 2022. Daigle interviewed approximately 10 to 12 staff members on site in December of 2022. Part of that included patrol officers, it included investigators, as well as the chief at that time, Carl Turner. The review also included the opportunity for victims to come forward anonymously and to be able to provide information through a website, a safe website portal that would allow them the opportunity to communicate directly with Daigle about any concerns that they would have. The first finding and the most significant one that we heard from Daigle was our records management system was inadequate. In doing so, evaluating that, they provided us with an opportunity to understand what it needed to include, and I will speak more about how we're moving forward with that. Finding number 2 was that investigations were materially deficient. Finding number 3, investigations were found to be inconsistent, ineffective, and incomplete. Finding number 4, the process of closing out investigations was flawed and inaccurate. Finding number 5 is that the audit determined that all complaints of misconduct by the department be investigated. Finding number 6 was that supervision was not adequate or sufficient to ensure a full and complete investigation. Finding number 7 was that policies and procedures did not meet the current industry standard. And then the 8th finding was that training was insufficient to effectively conduct sexual assault related investigations. To the victims, on behalf of the city administration and the Johnson City Police Department command staff, we acknowledge to you that there are cases where we did not handle your cases appropriately. We are prepared to review those cases. We're prepared to open those up. If needed on a case-by-case basis, we're prepared to regain your trust. We have learned a lot through this process. To go through and become a victim of sexual assault involves a lot of trauma that we are acknowledging, and we're making changes in our process to be able to assure victims that we will provide you the best care along with other advocates to do that. We sought out this audit in an effort to make sure that we serve you better. And this is particularly to the victims. This audit is to make sure that our police department addresses the needs of the victims first and foremost in doing this. The department's new leadership team is dedicated to continuing this process and implementing this with care and kindness toward all victims. We have collaborated with the DA's office and we are prepared, as I mentioned, to go back and look at cases, not only the ones specifically mentioned in the Daigle audit, but to look at all the cases and on a case-by-case basis, evaluate whether they can move forward. I want to make a comment now to our Johnson City Police Department staff. I have had the opportunity to work closely with the Johnson City Police Department staff over the past 5 months. That has included going to crime scenes where people were killed. It's including seeing our investigators work with the families of deceased individuals. And I have seen nothing but professionalism and integrity demonstrated within this department. I, along with other members of the city manager's team and the Johnson City Police Department command staff, are committed to helping us implement these findings within this audit. We acknowledge that the report identifies several shortcomings and several areas for improvement. We also want to acknowledge that within this report, there is no finding of willful intent, of corruption, or of illegal activity.
We're going to get there. It might not be in the report, but we're going to see a lot of that stuff steamroll out as we get into 2024. And that's really why this media briefing is so important. In my opinion, her demeanor is she looks a little bit deflated here. And I'm not even saying that as a criticism to her. This is a serious thing to find out that there's been a problem with. And she just got into this job somewhat recently. So she is now tasked with fixing what has happened before her. But at the same time, she seems to be a bit relieved that this report didn't find willful wrongdoing, didn't find corruption. And I really think that she's relieved in this moment to think, well, at least it's not the worst that it could be. And unfortunately, as we keep going, we're going to see that change a little bit. And we'll get to watch and see if she is dedicated to doing the right thing.
This department has been accredited since 1993 and has shown the ability to do continuous improvement. We are prepared to do that in the implementation of the findings of this audit. To our citizens, the Johnson City Police Department is committed to serving all members of our community, including those victims of sexual assault. When General Finney took office in September of 2022, he provided a roadmap, a protocol to our community in dealing with sexual assault for not only the city of Johnson City, but all those within the 1st Judicial District. Our department has worked closely with the DA in doing training to be able to make sure that we are following out the protocol that has been laid out so that we can have successful convictions of these crimes. Again, during my tenure over the past year and a half, I've seen the women and the men in the police department dedicate themselves to keeping our community safe. We intend to continue that work. City administration, again, along with the Johnson City Police Department, are dedicated to serving this community and making sure that our police department does so as well. While awaiting the audit, there was an opportunity, as we have discussed before, to be able to talk to Daigle about some of those findings. And I wanted to share with you some of the things that we've already taken on as a part of the implementation of these findings. The first one includes the review of the policies and procedures, which our police department calls general orders. We have hired a full-time staff attorney within the police department, Blake Watson, who is reviewing and evaluating all of the police department's policies and procedures to make sure they line up with best practices. We are completing a review of all sexual assault cases at policies and procedures. We are creating a comfortable space at our Family Justice Center to do interviews for victims and allow for victim advocates to be a part of that, as well as providing other services that victims need after the trauma that they face through sexual assault. The commission approved an additional $100,000 in training for the police department staff to fulfill the recommendations within the audit and make sure that we are conducting these investigations appropriately. Additionally, there is $50,000 dedicated to a new records management system that will ensure that we will be able to keep all of our records in the same place to ensure that we can bring assailants to justice. We are also in the process of evaluating the needs of staffing within the Criminal Investigations Division. Our staff has been working on developing a sexual assault division within that area that focuses specifically on sexual assaults and can make sure that we can provide that. We will be looking at adding additional staffing in order to be able to do that. In closing, we believe these steps will be significant. We believe this audit is significant. We believe there are significant findings within this that we are prepared to make changes. We commit to demonstrating improvements in the areas where we have fallen short. We will report our progress to the Board of Commission on a regular basis, but in no less than every 6 months. I will speak to the fact that we will be doing a presentation to our City Commission Thursday night. It will be early in the agenda, and we will be allowing public comment at that time. We will make a presentation on the full report, provide all of the findings with the recommendations, and be able to provide information about where we are in the process of making those improvements. And at this time, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Are the findings in this report a surprise to the city, or is this sort of on par with what you thought they would find?
We have been, as I mentioned, we have been in conversation with Daigle. So we had recognized the shortcomings that we had. And we had not specifically seen some of the cases that he had evaluated. So I will tell you that from a standpoint of reading it and the feeling of the cases that were looked at and the information associated with that, I think that was very difficult to see as part of the report. Generally, the findings about the record keeping system, the additional training, the leadership, we had anticipated that and had made some changes that we mentioned to within the budget based on that. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. You talked about some of those specific recountings that are within that report. And you already kind of made a personal message to victims, but I also wanted to ask how much, if at all, does what you saw in those specific recountings affect your determination to maximize the implementation of this plan?
We are committed to doing the right thing. I think that the thought of reading about the specific cases, we were fully intending to comply and to move forward with this. But we do not want any victim of sexual assault to go through the process of not feeling like justice has been served within the Johnson City Police Department.
Have you reopened any investigations so far, and do you have a gauge on how many or so?
We, at this point, we are still evaluating those on a case-by-case basis. We have only reopened cases where new evidence has been provided to us, but none associated with this report.
We asked last time about 3 or 4 weeks ago, you said that's a VA decision. Is there some agency on the part of the city and the JCPD to get something like that forward? New evidence is coming forward, or you just have to sit there and wait on the DA to decide whether they want to reopen something? We meet regularly with the DA. I think if the relationship is such that I feel like if our Criminal Investigations Division look at a case, they would go to the DA and say, can we take a look at this together? It's a joint relationship that could be reopened as a result. The DA has to authorize it, but the police department would make recommendations based on information they find in the file.
So you say that you've only reopened cases where there's new evidence. So in these situations like this report is outlining where the case just wasn't handled properly, are we going back and reviewing any of those?
So in the question that I answered to you, it was speaking previous to this report coming out. So after this report coming out, we will be evaluating all of these cases because as I mentioned earlier, we had not been privy to the cases that Daigle was going to provide in the report. So previous to this, we had been, when new information came forward, when a victim came forward, when there was additional return of DNA, anything like that. Now that we have received the report, we will be going through each of these files to see if these cases should be reopened on a case-by-case basis.
One of the things mentioned in the report was that there should have been an internal investigation into the allegations in the Cathy Ball lawsuit. Have you guys done that, or are you planning to do that?
I'm of course, as you can imagine, not able to speak to a lawsuit. My understanding under that finding was when there, prior to getting this report, when there was a lawsuit filed, our practice had been to let the lawsuit go through the process of determining the at fault, not at fault of the person who is alleged. We've learned differently now as a result of the Daigle lawsuit. So moving forward, we will be doing internal investigations and consider a lawsuit to be a complaint.
Are you going to do that in this case?
In which case? The employee named in that case no longer works for the city.
Daigle says that Johnson City can actually be a national model for this type of policing. That seems like, I mean, you read through that, it seems like a very high bar, looking at some of what he brings out. Do you believe that the city can become a national model?
I believe that in order for us to go through the effort of asking to be evaluated in this manner and reaching out voluntarily to say, we want you to come in and do an audit, that the belief of the findings of this and the implementation of that can put us on the cutting edge of how this is done. And it is my understanding that in looking at a lot of police departments, the way that sexual assault trauma-informed victims have been treated has changed tremendously. The understanding of it has changed tremendously over the past 10 years. I believe that us knowing this information, having this information available to us, can put us at the forefront ahead of what other departments are doing who may not have access to this information.
You had mentioned about.
And I think that's a fair point to make, not just for her to make in this media briefing, but for us to remember outside. You know, we have this huge catalyst here. Everything that's going on with Robert Vaux and Sean Williams, whatever you want to call him at any given point in time, and activism from people like Ben Putnam, and I'd even say Kateri Dahl. All these people that have advocated, like, do something about this. Why are these reports going nowhere? Why don't you care about victims that are coming forward? It took this major catalyst to put Johnson City in this position to be on the forefront of implementing new policies, listening to a report that audited the way that they've done things. So if there is a silver lining in a really atrocious thing that happened, it is that it is a catalyst for change like this in this way. And again, this is 2023. We are so far from being completely out of the mud, but this is where it starts. This is where the ball starts to roll. And it needs to start in more places than just Johnson City. Johnson City just happened to be the one with a major catalyst.
So all of our promotions within the command staff were done internally. None of the folks listed in there, none of the folks were a part of that lawsuit.
Jumping off on that, you selected Church to be chief, and you talked about how important all of this was. What are some of the things that you insisted upon being able to communicate with him that drew you to believe that he was the right person for this specific?
So new police chief right there.
In conversations about receiving the report, about asking for the audit, about getting feedback, Chief Church has always been very open to saying, yes, we want to learn how to do things better. Yes, we believe we can do things better. When I am talking to someone who has the confidence to say, tell me how to improve, tell me what I need to do better and to serve this community better, I know I have a good leader. And in early conversations with Chief Church, And I would go back to say when he was promoted to major, I saw those characteristics of him, being a humble person, being open to feedback, receiving the feedback very well, and having a positive attitude about moving forward. I will also say that the characterization around victims, around being trauma informed, all of those were comments that I was looking for in terms of having a chief that understood what it meant to serve victims of sexual assault.
I want to ask about a particular line that stood out to me from the report. This was in the introduction. The report attributes, quote, investigative shortcomings seem to stem from misconceptions and stereotypes about women and victims of sexual assault. What steps do you plan to take going forward to address that culture within the department?
So I think that that's a great question. And again, I would acknowledge that that was one that was very troublesome. I would say that and I wouldn't necessarily in my role see that, but I think a lot of the training around it and the understanding around it and the trauma-informed training that we will do will address that.
Are you worried at all that this may extend to other types of violent crime?
In the interviews and as the report reveals, the only cases that were looked at were the sexual assault. I have not seen or understood there to be any other since I've been here. I think if we determined that through an evaluation process, we would also do an audit of that.
The police department's leadership change was part of the early retirement program that the commission had put together, if I'm not mistaken. Did those retirements occur because of this situation? Or was it totally independent?
So I would just correct a little bit of what you said. It was a voluntary retirement incentive program in that everybody who was eligible for it had at least 30 years service with the city of Johnson City. One of the challenges that I faced coming into the city, and it was referred to even within the announcement of the job, is that there were a large number of folks who were eligible for retirement, and I think even referred to it as a silver tsunami. So the concept of doing a voluntary retirement incentive program was completely surrounded with understanding how many people who were in that category intended to be here for at least 2 to 3 years. So that whole program, the derivation of all of that program applied to everyone in the city. It wasn't limited to just the police department. And the folks who retired within the police department all met that criteria.
But this wasn't in mind when that program was created.
This was not in mind. We had not received the report. The interviews had not been done at the time this happened.
So really the main focus of this question from the journalist is, look, when the last police chief decided to take early retirement, was it just because of this administrative retirement incentive? Or could it have been because people were calling for him to be ousted and he was worried about what was on the horizon with this type of, this audit that came into play? And here Cathy Ball is saying, look, we didn't really have much information at the time that this program rolled out and people accepted this early retirement incentive. There really wasn't that much information available for me to assume or conclude or make an inference that that played a role in the former police chief taking early retirement. What do you guys think?
What do you think is the most important thing that needs to happen within the city to make your goals in this matter succeed?
I think it's happened. I think that getting this report, we've had a lot of conversation. As we've been honest with you, we received this report last Monday. When we received this report, it was very difficult to digest in terms of just reading the case files and really seeing the words on paper. But having the information and knowing how to move forward at this point is so powerful. So we know what we need to do. And oftentimes, if you're in a situation and we felt like something was getting ready to come, but we didn't exactly know what to do, and we've been trying to make efforts, one of the things I would continue to tell you is that we're all about continuous improvement. We want to improve. We want to serve our community better. We now have the tools that we need and the commission's full support to move forward on making these changes. So, and we are excited about the ability and the energy and the culture that we're seeing within the department to embrace these. I would say that in a lot of ways, we are doing promotions now. We see more people applying for promotions, and they know what's ahead of them. They see the challenge that's coming before them, and they're stepping up to take leadership roles to make this happen. We saw more candidates apply for police officers in the past 5 months. We had over 160, 150 applicants, and which, you know, hasn't happened in 5 to 6 years. And so we see the energy, we see the culture, we see the shift. But when you ask me, Mr. Keeling, where the turning point is, it is now. And we embrace it almost in a way of telling you, we have this, we're committed to it, we're ready to move forward.
I know it was not easy to have people gathered outside, you know, in July of 2022, coming in, tape over their mouth. Was there a purpose, though, when you look back? Is there at least a bit of appreciation for the passion that those citizens were showing at that time?
I think that we will always hear from citizens, regardless of how they express themselves. You know, we welcome feedback, we welcome criticism. You know, I can't specifically speak to the nature of the way that that happened or that drove us. If people come in and say, we have an issue, we have a complaint, we have a concern, we listen. So coming in, speaking, I won't necessarily say the way that happened, the way it was driven, but the fact that anybody expresses concern, if there is a nature of concern about the way we do any part of our work at the city, we're going to try to address it.
Okay, so right there, it seems like a PR answer, or maybe she was unfamiliar with what was going on, but I don't imagine how she could be. The reason the protesters had the tape over their mouth was because they weren't given the chance to speak at these meetings. So as a way to speak, they put tape over their mouths and wrote words on the tape. So maybe this would have been a good moment to say, look, we're going to look at the procedures for these meetings and make sure they're rearranged and make sure everybody that's hosting these meetings, running these meetings, in charge of these meetings, knows how things are supposed to go. That way we can promote better public access and conversation.
Is your message, I guess, to specifically women, but really people here in the city who have been keeping up with the news and read this report, who are maybe scared or don't feel safe in the city?
First of all, I would say to them, we care about you. We know more than we did. We understand more about trauma, the trauma that's caused from becoming a victim of sexual assault. And we know that we're committed to making sure the experience that you have moving forward is very compassionate, very caring, that you're surrounded by the right people moving forward. What I would say to folks who are following the lawsuits, I would ask them to allow the system to get all of the information out. I would encourage anyone, and this probably goes without saying, so I'm not trying to in any way speak down, but there is always information that people don't have the full story that can't be told in a lawsuit. And what I would say to each one of those is, let's give this opportunity to play out, for information to be heard, for the truth to be told, and each of that information. And it requires us to be patient. And we know we're of the nature of wanting answers now and wanting to make decisions now and wanting to form our own opinions now. I would ask you to hold, if I'm speaking as the clerk can ask, if I were speaking to the community, please get all the facts. Please make sure you know all of the information before you come to a conclusion or jump to a decision. What I'm committed to say to you publicly, transparently, is that we will serve victims and that we are committed to do that. I know that our DA's office, several meetings, is also committed. If people don't feel comfortable, go to the DA's office. Thank you all so much. Again, I appreciate that you all are willing to come in at the same time. And thank you.
So we are going to see, because that last part there, if we just found out from the audit that your record system sucked, things were incomplete, flawed, inaccurate, what is the quality of the information that the city could put forth in defense of the lawsuits against them? And again, here, at least in words, we have Cathy Ball taking the position of no excuses. It's on us. We know what we need to do, and now we've got to do it moving forward. That's something we've got to keep at the forefront, you guys, as we watch this progress. I'm going to do a separate video going into the DLG report because we did get a summary of the findings from the press briefing and the article. But here I thought there was at least one statistic that I wanted to put into this part 3. During our interviews, investigators confirmed that it was a practice at JCPD not to contact the alleged suspect until they were convinced that the assault reasonably did occur. This is baffling to the DLG team. For example, instead of conducting field interviews in SA cases, JCPD detectives generally call to make appointments with suspects, scheduling them sometimes weeks or more in advance. They do not attempt to conduct telephone or field interviews to obtain preliminary interviews in the interim. This practice undermines the integrity of SA investigations by denying investigators the ability to compare the suspects' and victims' accounts early in the investigation, and by allowing suspects too much time to modify or coordinate their stories. What is more concerning is that investigators did not even contact 66% of the identified suspects, let alone get a statement as to what happened. This undermines the effectiveness and likely success rate of the investigations. And I also thought it was worth mentioning how JCPD's investigative processes discourage victim participation. So this is what DLG found. Our investigation identified other JCPD practices that create unnecessary barriers to building trust and rapport with women reporting SA, and making reporting unnecessarily burdensome for the victim. For example, 1. Reluctance of the officers or investigators to continue investigative steps unless the victim comes to the department to give a statement. 2. JCPD requires that victims and witnesses be interviewed at the police station rather than at the location most convenient and comfortable for the victim. 3. The interview rooms at the JCPD are suspect-oriented with visible restraining devices. 4. JCPD investigators ask victims whether they wish to seek criminal prosecution early in the investigation and whether they would testify against the accused. Statements by JCPD investigators focus on the emotional toll of prosecution and the victim's unwillingness to participate in the prosecution. JCPD's SA investigations are sometimes compromised by an investigator's unwarranted gender-based assumptions and stereotypes about women. We'll see some of that when we look more into Cat Doll's lawsuit. JCPD generally does not invite advocates to be present during victim interviews. Instead, 2 JCPD detectives typically interview a victim without advocate participation. This practice is more appropriate for an interrogation of a suspect than an interview of a crime victim, and sometimes prevents detectives from developing the necessary rapport with women victimized by SA. Reporting an SA, including the time spent at hospitals and with JCPD, can take many hours. Efforts should be made to expedite the process. And then number 8, which I thought was big. JCPD too often does not follow up with victims to document evolving injuries such as bruises. And right on the heels of this audit, we are going to get into what we find out about the Johnson City Police Department and the investigation, how this investigation into Michaela Evans' fall from Sean Williams' window proceeded, how it was handled. We're also going to get into Sean Williams' attempted jail escape, and we're finally going to start to see what computer files show Sean Williams was doing. These devices were finally obtained and examined after his April arrest, even though Cathy Ball wanted the initial search warrants and arrest warrants to encompass the seizure of these devices years ago. So we've got some motion thanks to all the people that have been asking for change, and then this audit coming out with this report that did not exonerate the Johnson City Police Department by any means. In fact, it called out several areas of incompetence, incompleteness, and flawed investigative work. And what we're going to see as we move forward is this is going to spark and motivate and encourage these civil lawsuits to move forward, for Jane Does to speak. It's also going to motivate, in my opinion, Sean Williams to try to get up, out, and escape. We're going to see him be able to flee and escape from custody. He's going to become a fugitive, and he's going to be on the run. So stay tuned for part 4. Let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about. What do you think about these media briefings? You guys all take care until next time. See you then.